Okay, good afternoon. I'm quite conscious of time, so I think we'll get rolling and people can join in just if those that are running a little bit late, they can just jump in. So welcome to this Humber Growth Hub webinar, part of the Grow My SME webinar program, which is supplied by the Growth Hub and is a part of a number of initiatives that they have rolling at the moment to help businesses in the Humber to grow and thrive and innovate and future-proof. We'll be talking about some of the specific support that's available, like your business can get involved with at the end of the webinar. So stick around for that because some really interesting stuff in there with very tailored, funded one-to-one support, which I think you'll be very interested in. But this afternoon we're talking all things technology and all things digital. So this afternoon's webinar, technology and digital company essentials. If you're a tech company or a digital-based company, this is going to be relevant to you. You may be already familiar with some of the stuff, but some of the stuff up you should be quite insightful. However, if you're not, for any other business, whatever sector you're in, if you're in retail or manufacturing or health or events or service provider, whatever it is that you do, this is particularly relevant because we're going to be discussing the fundamentals behind a technology-based project or a digital-based project. And how to develop some of the methodologies for developing these and understanding the digital first consumer. My name is Wayne Willis. I'm an innovation consultant with the Dennett Group, and I'm joined by my colleagues Robert Lewis and Jamie Del Grosso, both from the Dennett Group. Jamie's going to be taking you through this afternoon session. We do encourage you to ask questions, add any comments. I realise that the attendees on here will be all from all different types of businesses and backgrounds. And so you'll all have your own specific circumstances, and we're happy to answer those throughout as and when we can, and if we can't, we'll try and get to them at the end. So I welcome you to submit questions. There's a Q&A box at the bottom of your screen there, which you can submit via. We'll get underway and speak to you at the end about the further support. Jamie, I'll hand over to you.
Thanks, guys. Hi, guys. So my name's Jamie, as Wayne said, and I'm part of the Dennett Group. So the Dennett Group is an innovation consultancy. We work with groups and companies all over the world to help them develop innovation strategies, new products, new services. And the way we do this is something we call the 3Ds. So the 3Ds are be disruptive, think differently, and embrace digital. Obviously, today we're going to be focusing on the latter part of that, which is embrace digital. So when we're talking about digital, what we're talking about is the use of physical technology or virtual technology to aid in a function or operation. So this could be something that is consumer side, something that you're giving to your consumers. It could be something that you're using to help you in your day-to-day operations as a business, to make it more efficient or to reduce costs. But it's to help in that function or operation to make it more efficient and to make it easier to manage. So if we look at what a business may have looked like, I don't know, maybe 10, 15, 20 years ago, a business of significant scale would need to look something like this. So they would need a fair amount of infrastructure, a fair amount of office space. They would need lots of people doing lots of different jobs. And it was quite an expensive thing to actually scale up a company. Where nowadays, a company with the same sort of scale could look something like this. And what we're seeing nowadays is that people are developing companies or products or new services from a laptop, from a back bedroom, from a remote working space, and they're able to develop things on quite a high level, which is able to disrupt existing business models, it disrupts existing industries. And this growth in digital has really caused the typical corporate lifespan to actually be massively reduced, because if you think of the companies that are at the top of all the business indexes now, you're looking at things like Google or Facebook or Apple, which not that long ago, they didn't even exist. And Google, Airbnb, these sort of companies were actually developed by or started by one or two people on a computer working in a bedroom somewhere. So this really shows the scale of digital and what it's done in the business landscape, and the effect it's had. And really, if as a company you're not embracing digital, you do run the risk of disruption to what you do. If you are a company that embraces that digital technology, it can actually be a great catalyst for slingshotting you forward in that industry, in opening up new markets and gaining better revenue. So when we're talking about digital, another thing to consider is actually that the digital technology that we have developed is now helping us develop further technology. So this, as an example, is from Google DeepMind. So Google DeepMind is a machine learning supercomputer. And unlike normal computers where it's pre-programmed to know answers to specific tasks or questions or challenges, a machine learning computer is able to figure those out itself. So in this example, Google gave the computer this humanoid figure and give it the challenge of getting from point A to point B in the most efficient way possible. And obviously they put obstacles and things in the way. And in 3 hours, this machine was able to figure out the mechanics of walking. I mean, it looks quite comical in the way it walks, but in 3 hours, it was able to figure that mechanic out without ever seeing a human walk, without any previous information. All it had was the humanoid figure and how to get from point A to point B. Now, if we consider how long it takes a human to understand and master that mechanism of walking and the amount of years it takes, it shows that the technology we're developing now is able to find answers to questions much more quickly, more efficiently than we can. And if we actually look at technological advancement in where we are right now, so this graph is from a company called the Emerging Future. And what they do is they look at trends in technology and where they think those trends will be in the future. And they did some research where they looked at technological advancement over the next 5 years. And they said that over the next 5 years, we'll be 32 times more advanced than we are today in terms of technology and our capabilities. But when they enhanced that, looked over a further period of time, over 10 years, they actually worked out that we'd be 1,000 times more advanced. Now, although that seems like a very steep curve up, when we consider that we are developing technologies now that are in turn developing further technologies and pushing us further, we essentially create this snowball effect where as we get more advanced, we actually speed up our progression and develop even further. And they carried this on, and then when they looked at 20 years, if that trend continues, they think that would be over 1 million times more advanced in our technical capabilities than we are today.
Jamie,
yes.
Jamie, do you mind if I just make a point? It's Rob here, sorry. I was just going to say, I was going to follow in from your AI thing with the wall slalom thing. These kind of technologies are really challenging some of the traditional kind of professions. So if you're a doctor, an accountant, a lawyer, a solicitor, a surveyor, all of these things could potentially be replaced by AI. And obviously, as Jamie said, the rate of technology, change is amazing, and that's only become more and more prevalent as we go forward. So lots of businesses are going to be disrupted, including the classic professional class, if you like. Sorry, Jamie, just interrupted you there, mate.
No, that's a really good point, which leads nicely on to the next bit, actually. So just as an example, if we're talking about the growth of technology, this was actually the first touchscreen phone, and this came out in 1991, which may seem like a fair amount of time, but actually, when we think about where we are today with smartphones compared to this, which looks very primitive, in that time period, in that 30 years or so, got my maths right there, we have jumped so far ahead that our smartphones now are people using phones to run businesses, to manage the day-to-day life. And then if we look at technology that's maybe come along a little bit closer to modern day, so virtual reality. Now, there's been versions of virtual reality that have existed for 20 years or so, but actual consumer available mass market VR has only been available for a few years now. It's still a very new technology. And in the few years that it's been available freely on the market as it has, we've already seen huge growth in what it's allowed us to achieve. So this example is someone using it for developing new machinery and things and engineering. And this is only a few years old, and we're now developing new technologies, new machines in this case, new things based on this technology. So if we look at that time period, And then we look at things that we know are about to be released in the next couple of years. Smart glasses, for example, we know every major tech manufacturer is currently working on a pair of smart glasses. When those are launched in the next year or two, how quickly will that affect industries, and what new information will we gain? So really, when we're looking at digital technology or technology of any kind, it really is starting to have a significant impact. It starts to have a much quicker impact on industries. And it's really something that needs to be taken seriously. And really, if it's something that could be adopted and brought into your own business, then you're not only protecting yourself from that disruption that Rob mentioned earlier, but you're also opening up new opportunities in the future and helping to future-proof the business model you currently have. So that's a little bit of information on the power of digital, why it's important, and actually why we've put together this presentation to go through today. But now what we're going to do is go through a couple of bits of information, a few tools and things that you can use to look at how you can embrace digital for your own business, and how you can make sure that any digital products that you may create, whether it's for yourself or your consumers, maybe it's for a client, maybe you are a digital provider, is something that has meaning, is something that is likely to be adopted and likely to work in the environment. So the first thing to consider is understanding the digital first consumer. So consumers now are much more digitally oriented than they have ever been before. And there's a couple of great examples of this, which you probably have all seen in everyday life and from even in your own experiences. So one of the big examples would obviously be social media, something that has arguably probably been one of the biggest influencing factors in digital for a long time now. And obviously we know the impact it has on personal lives, and we see social media related things in the news every day, and even in politics now. But actually from a business level, it's actually having huge impacts on the way that people purchase, people subscribe to services, people hire. So this is from a bit of research from a company called Pixley, who look at basically business trends online and digital businesses. And they found that 43% of consumers are more likely to buy a product if they've already engaged with that brand online. And when we talk about products, we're not just talking about B2C products, like straight to consumer products. We're talking business services, B2B, anything. If that brand has seen your services online, then they are much more likely to interact with you and buy into your product or service. Another statistic there, that 74% of consumers rely on social media to guide their purchases. Now, social media is particularly prevalent if you are selling a product and you are selling straight to consumers. But even if we look at a B2B scenario, if you are looking for, let's say, a new piece of equipment for your company, maybe you're looking for a new printer or something, if someone suggests that you go and look at a particular printer, the first thing I'm imagining most people would do is go onto Google that printer, look for the stats, look at reviews, look at prices. So really, the internet is becoming the first gatekeeper of whether people buy into a product or a service. Rob, did you want to jump in?
Yeah, sorry, Joe. I was just going to say that, like today, for modern industry, modern capitalism, the primary thing that people are trying to do is capture people's attention. So when you're on your social media, you're obviously looking at what your friends are doing. So if you're a product or a service, you've got to really cut through that noise. And it's the same with Googling. You might want to look at some nonsense clickbait, but as a business, you've got to compete with that. And it's highly distracting. So you've got to be really good at getting over a bit what it is you do, what unmet needs and benefits you bring to a potential consumer, and be really visual and engaging in that conversation. And it's really, really hard. It's like historically you put an advert on the TV, on local radio, and you got customers. Now that model is completely blown apart, and you've got to be a lot smarter about how you get those guys. Cheers, Jamie.
Yeah, thanks, Rob. Yeah, that's absolutely true. And this particular research was looking a lot at social media, but as Rob said, even more organic search, things like Google, people do use that as essentially like the shop window for your services. And it is massively influencing how people are interacting with the products, how people are interacting with the service, with the company. And over the years, I've worked with a lot of different clients that have sort of said, well, I don't want to be on social media. I don't see the value in it, or my service isn't sort of the right service to be on the internet, have a website, to be on social media. Which I still find surprised that people think like that. This is the deciding factor for a lot of people. It's the first thing that most people do. And 60% of small to medium businesses have actually said that they've gained new customers directly through social media or through digital search. So it's thinking not just about your brand and not just about your product, your face-to-face interaction, but how does your brand, how does your product translate online, and how do you interact with people online? So as Rob said, you have to be a bit smart about how you think about that nowadays. The other major trend is the mobile first consumer. So now most people are actually using mobile devices to gather information and to find information about things. So when we started sort of promoting more on the internet and there was sort of the emergence of e-commerce, everything was done on a desktop computer, everything was done on a big screen, and now we're looking at smaller and smaller devices. We're looking at people search information on the go. So you have to have a completely different way about thinking of your online presence and how you present that information. And just to give a little bit of information about that, so there's a lot of information you can find about general mobile traffic use online, and I think it's about 80-90% of web traffic is now on a mobile. But this information I've got here is specifically looking at business interaction, so people purchasing things, people looking at B2B services and service-based businesses. And basically, over the last 7 years, we've gone from just over 16% of people using mobile devices to now over half of the people that are looking at your services will be looking on a mobile. And if we look at this as a trend, basically what we can see is that the desktop users are quickly becoming less and less as the years go on, and mobile is increasing to a point where now it has surpassed the desktop users. And through any research that you look at, through any trend analysis, everybody's expecting this to carry on and to keep going. And as I said earlier, with new technologies coming out, so smartphones are getting smarter. People now have smartwatches, which you can, on some smartwatches, actually view information on websites and things on. Smart glasses are about to become a bigger thing over the next couple of years. There's a lot more ways that people will be interacting with your product services, maybe the digital product you may release, than they have ever done in the past. So you really need to think about all these different platforms when you're looking at your brand or just any digital product or service you may create. And the final thing, which is very recent, but is actually becoming a major deciding factor in whether people buy into new digital platforms or technology, is that the new digital first consumer is much more ecosystem aware. And what we mean by this is now technology has got to a point where it is no longer a transactional single piece of technology. All of these technologies become part of an ecosystem. So on the screen, we have the Alexa ecosystem, for example. If you're looking at buying a smart product for your home, chances are you're going to look for one that connects to the Alexa system that you already have at home. Sorry if anyone's got one of those devices, by the way, if I'm triggering it. So this is something that people are now aware of. And if we even look at things like the computers used, and if you have a Mac, if you have an Apple computer or an iPhone or an iPad, you're already massively bought into that system. So if someone releases an app for an Android, you're not going to get a new phone just to access that app. There needs to be something that is already on the ecosystem they're using and they're comfortable with. And these are just getting bigger. These are becoming more inclusive. And Amazon, for example, are now looking at releasing Alexa for Business. So you'll be able to have things like the big screen that you've got there, using that for video conferencing and like we are today. So all of these ecosystems will become more prevalent in the business landscape as well. And if you are developing products, even if it's for yourself and you're looking at how you can develop digital services to improve what you do, it's something that you should be aware of. What ecosystems do you already have? What technologies do you already have in place? And what I'm bringing in, will it add to that or will it disrupt it? And that is a huge deciding factor on what a consumer will look at when they're looking at buying into a new technology. So we've looked at what a digital first consumer, maybe looking at the trends and what it is that will help them decide if they want to buy into it. But now what we're going to look at is essentially what is a digital product, and sort of break it down to get rid of some of the jargon that you may hear when you're looking at sort of maybe you're developing an app, maybe you're developing a website, maybe you're looking at a brand new type of tech product. And we're going to try and break it down to a point where you can understand everything that goes into these products, and then we'll go through that in a little bit more detail and how to understand what that means. So any digital products will tend to have these 4 areas of it. So on the left is the storage, and the storage on a digital product is like your database. It's the data you collect. It's the thing that fuels whatever the platform is. So for example, if you are an e-commerce website or you're an app that takes payments for something, what data do you need to collect? Are you collecting personal data? Are you a comparison platform? Maybe you need to collect, maybe you're doing comparisons of particular products. You need to get all the information for those products. You need to put them in there. It's the thing that essentially creates value to whatever the platform is. Without the storage, without that database and the data within it, essentially this is just, the rest of the product is just a pretty front end. There's no value to it. So storage is a key thing. Then the next step on that is the back end. So when you talk about development, you'll hear people talk about front end and back end a lot. Some of you, if you're already used to working with digital products, you've probably heard these, you probably know what these mean. But for those who don't, back end is basically anything that you don't really see. So this is the function of a digital product. So this is the bit that says what that product does, the functions it has. If it's a payment system, it may be how that payment works, the payment gateways that you use. And it's really the set of rules that determine what happens when a user interacts with that product in various ways. So it's kind of like the brains of that digital product. And then the step that everyone does see, which is the front end, is essentially the bit that the consumer interacts with. So this is the website, the app, the piece of technology, whatever it is that you're creating. This is the bit that can be seen by the consumer. It's the bit that they will interact with to control the back end, to get the data from that storage. And then obviously the final step is delivery. So that is, how is that information sent from storage to back end to front end and vice versa. So in some cases, if you are taking payments, for example, you may need to consider how secure is the data being transferred. So I'm just going to break this down in a slightly different way so that it maybe makes more sense to people that aren't used to digital products or developing digital products. So in this example, we're going to look at a car, and the car is going to be our digital product. So the first step would be, as I said, the storage. So the storage is like the fuel for the car. Without it, the car is just a pretty thing, but it doesn't go anywhere. It doesn't have any use. So we need the storage in place to actually make what we have momentum and actually do anything. Next step we'd look at is the back end. So this would be like the inner mechanics of your car. So the engine, the wheels, the delivery system, which would be the fuel lines. So it's the thing that takes that fuel and it actually applies some function to it to make it do something, in this case to make the car move. The next step, and this is the first thing that a consumer interacts with, is the front end. Now, when we're looking at a front end, this is what will give the consumer the first impressions of what your product is about. So no matter how good all of this stuff is, if you don't have a front end that is appealing to a customer, they're probably not going to buy into that product. So for example, here we've got what looks like quite a nice car, but equally we could have the same in the mechanics, but maybe the shell of that car is some beat up old car that wouldn't have the same interest to the consumer. And finally, and probably one of the most important elements, is what we call the UX, which is the user experience. And this is really where the psychology comes into play when you're looking at the design of a product into the way that it functions. This is how the consumer interacts with your product to control all those bits behind the scenes that I can't see. So this could be things like, where buttons are placed within an app. It could be how many clicks does it take to actually get to where they need to be? What is the journey? Is it easy? Is it hard to understand? And creating a UX, user experience, that is clear, concise, and that the consumer can understand is really what determines whether that product works well and if people will continue to use it. So no matter how pretty a car is, if it's impossible to drive and you're likely to get into accidents or something, you're not going to buy that car. And the same goes for digital products. If it's too hard for a consumer to use and get to where they want to be, they will not use that product no matter how good it is behind the scenes, no matter how clever it is. So really, you need all of these aspects to work in perfect cohesion so that that product is a successful and well-built product. Okay, so now we've gone through some of the basics of the anatomy of a product. Really what we need to look at is how you actually decide what is the product that you would want to create or you would want to buy into or that you think your consumers will want. And the way that we tend to do this with our clients is we look at something called the 5 E's. So these are what we've identified as 5 key consumer needs that every consumer will look at, and it tends to work across the board. So whether it's a business consumer, whether it's a direct-to-consumer product, or if it's even within your own business, these 5 E's tend to work. So the first thing to understand is the digital landscape is noisy, and this is the point Rob was getting to earlier. For every product that's out there, there is thousands and thousands of almost identical products that do similar things. So how do you cut through that noise and make sure that your product is the one that people will buy into, that they want to use? And the way that we tend to look at doing this is, firstly, making sure that that product is addressing unmet consumer need or pain points, so that you're actually adding value to the consumer. It's not just a cool product, it's something that actually is meaningful to a consumer, to you as a business, to whoever that end user is. And basically we have this formula is essentially what a formula for creating that successful digital delivery. So it's taking that consumer need, which we'll go through what those are in a second, taking digital innovation, and we'll actually go through some examples of types of digital innovation, and then looking at how you can get early adopters. And when you bring all these together, you can create a successful digital delivery. So we'll break all of these down. We'll sort of explain how you can go about each of these elements. And then when you bring all of them together, that's when you can create something that really cuts through that noise. A lot of products, especially digital products nowadays, will fall into that category of just more noise and will disappear, mostly because they've missed one of these elements. So they may have something that does address a consumer need and is very clever, but they couldn't get early adopters on it, they couldn't get it out there, and in the end it just it's something that disappeared. Or it's a really clever idea and it's a great example of digital innovation, and they maybe got people to buy into it, but the consumer just didn't see the value and it didn't offer enough, it didn't address enough pain points or add enough value to them. So really it's about making sure you get all of these elements in place. So when we're looking at consumer needs, as we said, we have the 5 E's. So the 5 E's for us are ease, entertainment, economic factors, education, and the ecosystem. So basically what each of those mean is when we're looking at ease, we're looking at how efficient that product is or how efficient it makes another function or operation, as we said at the start. So this could be in automating tasks. It could give a user more control or better control of something that already exists. It could even be something as simple as it's a system that already exists, but maybe the user experience wasn't good enough in the original system. So you create something that is much more user-friendly. And anything that makes life easier for that end user. So that end user could be one of your customers, or it could be you. It could be something you're developing for your business to make you more efficient in what you do to make life easier. So then you can create a better product for your consumers or offer a better service to your consumers. The second E is entertainment. So now people are consuming data at such a huge rate. People are always looking at new ways to get in entertainment or excitement in some way online. So this could be delivering entertainment itself, so things like Netflix and Spotify, or it could be something that facilitates that entertainment. And from a business point of view, it could also mean adding an element of excitement or fun to something that already exists. So this factor is something that depends on your business model. For some businesses, it may not be relevant, but depending on what type of business you've got, if you're a service-based business, for example, is there a way that you can make that engagement with the customer a little bit more entertaining, a bit more exciting, or just nicer for them to use? The biggest one, I think this is one that is obvious to everybody, especially if it's for a business or for yourselves, is how can you make things more economic? So how can you get better value for money? How can you reduce costs or get more value from the cost that you are spending? And also a massive trend that we are seeing nowadays is the different types of payment methods. So there is a huge trend for people looking at subscription-based models over transactional-based business models. So even though in a lot of those cases, you may actually be paid more for the products in the long run, consumers are now being drawn towards the idea of a smaller monthly payment than a large sum of money. So if there's a way that you can use digital technology to create a better payment method for your consumers that makes things more easy for them or is more appealing to them, it's a great way to get early adopters, as we said, and also to just get people to buy into that product and choose you over the noise that is already out there. When we talk about education, we're not talking about education in the form of training or teaching something new. We're really talking about information. We're talking about access to data, to metrics, to information about what that consumer is doing, maybe what product or service is doing, and also an element of gamification. So a good example of this is fitness trackers. So most people now tend to have some form of smartwatch or fitness tracker. So most people are wearing a Fitbit or something similar. Now, Fitbit arguably has had one of the biggest impacts on health of any digital product for a significant amount of time. But Fitbit doesn't actually do anything directly to aid your health. It doesn't do anything. It literally just provides you with information. So by giving people information of how many steps you've done, how many calories you've burned, metrics on sleeping patterns and your health in general, people are now more informed about the lifestyle living, and it's encouraging people to live healthier and do more. Also, with Fitbit, for example, you can connect that to other people's devices or other people's accounts. So you can see what other people are doing, and it adds that competitive element to it. They've actually not too long ago added a feature where you can taunt each other. So I have friends and family that also have Fitbits, and if they've done more steps or done more exercise than me in a week, I might get a taunt, which comes through as a notification on my phone, which then is encouraging me to do more to try and beat them. So adding that element of competition and gamification can really encourage people to change their behaviours. and also is a very attractive element for any consumer. And finally, as we said before, it's looking at ecosystems. So can you take this product and can it tie into an existing ecosystem? So will it work with existing technology they've already got? Will it work with maybe a smart home assistant, or with the Apple infrastructure, or with maybe you have an ecosystem within your industry that people are already using? Can you tie in with that rather than creating a standalone product? And also, can you create your own ecosystem? So really, now if you can create an ecosystem for your products, for your services, just like Apple, just like those other platforms, you're tying people into sticking with your products. So if something else comes along further down the line, they're not going to want to change all of the systems they've already got in place because they're already bought into that ecosystem. So by developing something that is wider than just a standalone product, you're also creating a bit of safety and protection for your brand within that space, and keeping people coming back to you when they want a solution. So a single one of the, if you can take one of these consumer needs, it really helps with a product and getting it out there. But if you can take multiple of these, so if you can create something that is better economic value for someone, is more entertaining, and various other things, you can really take a product into overdrive and massively cut through that noise. It's not always easy to do, but the more consumer needs that you can address with your products, the more valuable your product is, and the more likely you are to break through that noise. Rob?
Yeah, sorry, Jamie, I'm just trying to get my camera to work. Sorry, I know I'm forgetting what I was going to say. Thanks for summarising that, Jamie. I think like the key message we're trying to give here also is that like not everything should be digital. You can literally make everything digital if you wanted to, but a lot of things wouldn't make sense. What Jamie's outlined is it's all about really understanding your customer, understanding your consumer, the problems and the pains that they face, and identifying an unmet need that digital can address. And you know, if you can do the ease that Jamie outlined, then you're getting pretty close to it. Thanks. Sorry.
Yeah, thanks, Rob. Yeah, so as we said in the formula that we had on screen earlier, if we can take one of those consumer needs or pain points, we can then look at a type of digital innovation or a digital platform, product, service, whatever that we can integrate to address that. So what we're going to do is basically go through a couple of sort of top level digital innovation trends, just to give you some ideas of how you could take one of those 5 E's, take one of these digital innovations and bring them together to potentially create a brand new product or service. So the first digital innovation trend is automation, and especially for the business landscape, this is huge. So if we consider things like Xero, so most businesses, I'd be willing to bet right now, are using some form of digital or automated accounting software. So as a business grows, in the past you'd need to have an accounting team, a bigger accounting team, you'd have to bring on more people, there'd be a huge infrastructure in place to manage that. Now people are able to do that with one piece of software. And because it's a digital platform, it allows them additional benefits of they can access it on the phone when they're out and about. If a customer says, okay, I'm ready, can you send me an invoice? You can literally pick up your phone, press a button, and that invoice is sent. So you're automating that process. And in this case, for example, you're addressing that consumer need of ease. You're making it easier for them to use. You probably arguably adding some form of entertainment in the fact that it's probably easier, it's probably more simple and engaging to use this than it is to have to go through loads of paperwork. And you're addressing addressing multiple consumer needs, which is why now they're becoming sort of the standard go-to accounting package for companies of various sizes. Small to large companies are using Xero now to run entire organizations. Another example, so I think Rob mentioned this earlier in the presentation, is Babylon. So Babylon is an AI-powered telemedicine platform. So basically, rather than going to a GP's office and sitting in a waiting room and trying to get seen by somebody, you can now download an app onto your phone. you can talk about whatever the issue is, whatever the ailment is, and through an AI system, it will be able to identify trends. So for example, here I've got a headache. It will know what questions to ask, and then it will know at what point through that AI process, okay, this sounds like there may be something wrong with this person. They can then have the human interaction where you can speak to a GP through your phone, through a video tool like we're doing today, and discuss what that issue is. Or if it's something minor, they may be able to just give you some basic things that could help with whatever it is that's going on. And this is obviously addressing a huge consumer benefit in the fact that they could just sit at home and get help from a doctor. They don't have to get up early in the morning and make sure that they're ringing quickly to get their appointment. But for the doctors and the GPs and the NHS itself, they're actually reducing those wait times. They're actually reducing the burden on those facilities. And they've even gone a step further. So they have the app. They're now creating, this thing on the right is the Babylon Health Kit. So this comes with a series of tools. I think it's like digital thermometers, things that, or whatever, that will basically get information, further information from you for a better diagnosis. So this is essentially like another product that is added onto this, creating some form of ecosystem for what they do, and making this a more attractive package to consumers. But this is all automated. This is something that is AI powered. A lot of people that go through this will be dealt with by the chatbot. So it's making things a lot easier for the GPs and things that are behind it. The next thing is, as we mentioned earlier, information gamification. So we've already talked about things like Fitbit and the impact that's had. But in a business environment as well, we can take that element of gamification. So this platform Compete is basically a gamified sales tool. So this is something you put in like a call center. You would connect it to the phones and the different sales systems you've got. And it would assign points to people based on various factors. I don't know how many calls you've made that day, or how many sales you've made. And it will create a scoreboard, which can then be, you can assign benefits and things through it. So this is adding that element of competition to a business environment, using information, using data that's collected, which is going to encourage and motivate people to do more. So with a lot of these technologies, you'll notice that we're talking very much about consumer products. That's because in the consumer, direct consumer market, you see a lot of growth and a lot of development. And it's the things that people tend to recognize. But on a business level as well, like selling your services to a business, all of these can still be implemented. And it's just about thinking differently about the technology and the use of that technology to add value to you and your end user. Integration is looking at how products work together, how they transfer information, and how they use the information from other products or services. So the example that most people have probably seen is things like smart homes. So in a smart home, you have a wide variety of different services and products that are interconnected. And some of these could either be as simple as a light bulb that has a Wi-Fi sensor in it to turn it on and off. But by putting that sensor in, which is actually, I think it's about 30, 40p to actually get a Wi-Fi sensor and put it into a piece of technology, they can actually sell it at 5, 6, 7 times the cost of a traditional light bulb or whatever it is, because it's got more value to consumers. It's connected to the ecosystem that they've already got. But also, you can use the idea of integration as your product, as your service itself. So this company, Automatic, I think called something else in the UK. This is the American version, but basically what they sell is this little box that you can see there, and this plugs into the computer on your car, and it's able to pull a load of diagnostic data and information about your car, which it then puts onto an app, so you can see information about your car, how it's performing, and various other things. Now, they're actually not providing any of that information. These are the same diagnostics metrics that a mechanic can access when they plug a computer into a car. all they're doing is providing you with a way to access that yourself. They charge you for this box and then charge a monthly subscription to continue to use the app. And there is a huge amount of people that are signing up to this. If you consider industries that are very automotive based, if you're looking at taxis and things, this could actually be something of huge value to them, knowing how well the cars perform, when they might need to change tyres, if they've got issues. So the integration itself could also be the products that you are creating, selling, developing for yourselves. Personalization is something that people are kind of just expecting now when it comes to technology. So when we look at digital services, people want a more tailored experience, something that is specific to them. The sort of more generic platforms and things now are seen as quite old school, quite out of date. So if we look at very popular examples of this, if we look at something like Netflix, Netflix is a great example of this because it does it in a very subtle way, so that it isn't overly obvious what's going on. It just kind of, it works within their UI and the way it's developed. So if you watch a program, a film, whatever, it can start making suggestions based on what you've watched in the past. But actually behind the scenes, it actually does it more than that, and it actually changes the order that the films are shown in. It also changes the screenshots that you see in there, so the images for the films. They actually have, Netflix has 3 or 4 variations for each of those. And based on the kind of films you watch or the kind of things you are drawn to, it may change them to slightly darker imagery, or it might change them to something that looks a bit more happy and positive if that's the kind of films you watch. So they're completely tailoring that experience to engage you and to make you want to click on that film, program, whatever, and watch it. So with personalization, it's not just about storing information that's unique to that user. It's about how can you tailor that experience so that it's more attractive to each individual user. There's lots of different ways that can be done. And very relevant now with what's going on with the pandemic and the lockdown we've all been in, communication and productivity has seen, there's been a huge explosion of people looking for this kind of technology. So although it's been around for a long time, people are now really starting to see the benefits of it and how they can communicate and collaborate and work online. So if we look at tools like Slack, a lot of people that are on it may even use this within their own businesses or have used it within various groups. Slack is essentially a messaging tool that you can use within your organization to share information, to share files. But when Slack came about, there was a huge explosion of people using it because, going back to the 5 E's, other than it being easy and you're not having to use things like emails to constantly speak to all of your people internally as well and have 300 unread emails in your inbox all the time, they also realized that people were using lots of different technologies in the business, and what people wanted was information in one place that was easy to access, easy to understand, without having to flip between lots and lots of different services. So Slack really put a focus on integration and how they could bring all of that together and make it easier for the customer. So if you use this tool, for example, you can pull in information from your CRM, from your sales tools, and you can have all that information pulling through and providing reports, providing interactions and things that you can add into those chats, into those communications with your colleagues or whatever. And this is really kind of changing how people work now. So there's a new phrase that people are using, which is it's conversational collaboration or conversational working or whatever. And that is basically, rather than sending like a very formal email, everything is done in natural conversation. So you could be talking about something, drop in those sales figures, talk about it more. Here's the customer I was talking about, pulling from a CRM. And it creates a much more efficient way of working. And the final type of innovation, digital innovation, is one that's really emerging over the last couple of years, and we're now really only starting to see the technology that allows us to do this to a high enough level for it to be considered. So if we look at things like virtual reality, virtualization is basically taking something physical and completely digitizing it and creating it in a virtual space. So this could be through a headset like this. So this example is a surgery virtual reality trainer, which basically allows students to practice perform surgeries without the risks that would come from actually performing the surgeries. It can be monitored. They can add specific elements into it, so they could change factors in different training scenarios to train people better. And obviously it's less expensive because once they have this kit, they can use it multiple times rather than using dummies or whatever else that they're using. But there's also things like augmented reality, which is using a phone. You can use an iPad or something to overlay digital information on the real world. If you think Snapchat filters and that kind of thing, it's that kind of technology. And again, this can be used to provide additional information to things that are going on, with things like smart glasses and things about to come onto the market. It could be how you add something that has value in a digital way to the real world. So we're really seeing people looking at using virtualization for adding value and adding information to real world scenarios and to train or to experience things in a way that is cheaper and more efficient than doing it in real life. And the other thing to consider is we've talked about a lot of different ways that you can create your own products, but there is so many products that are already out there. And sometimes actually that innovation, that new products, that thing that you implement could be just finding the right tool that already exists and bringing that into what you do or into what you're offering your clients. So a few kind of free and easy ways to do this. First is through trend analysis. So if you go to this website, trends.google.com, this is a completely free tool by Google, and you can use this to search for different trends, different bits of technology or different keywords, and it will tell you what the online interest is in that particular word or trend over time in different geographies and things. So it's a great way to get a quick idea of maybe how different things within your industry are trending, what people are talking about more, what consumers are talking about. Another example, and this is actually a website that I use this pretty much every single day. Product Hunt is what we call a beta board. So essentially it's a website that lists new technologies that are coming out, new digital products for other people in the industry to look at and give feedback on. And it's a good way to sort of test products. So you can access this for completely free. There is a lot of other options out there, but the reason I always tell people to look at Product Hunt is even the large companies, so when Google or Apple develop something new, they tend to post it on this website to gain initial feedback and to see what people think. So you can check this whenever, and you will see a list of popular technologies every single day that have been posted, new technologies, and then they're ranked on popularity, what people think will make a difference, what people think will catch on, and people think it's a good idea. So it's a great way to find technologies for you to integrate with, to work with, or just to see what people are interested in, what trends are happening within the industry, and what things you should be considering. Another example is Kickstarter. So for those of you that don't know what Kickstarter is a website that allows you to put a product on there, a product that may be in like a prototyping phase or something that's still a concept, and people back that idea by basically paying for that idea, so pre-ordering that product or that service. So with Kickstarter, the added benefit is that you're getting a good feel for if people are interested in your product, but you can kind of almost fund it a little bit through this. And also you can use those metrics of how many people are backing an idea to see what's trending, what people are liking, and find new technologies. Again, it's a great way to find what people are looking at. I would say Kickstarter is a little bit more consumer focused, and it's looking at bits of tech that you can buy yourself, where Product Hunt is probably a bit wider and is looking at more top level technology. But all of these are great tools, they're all free to access, to look at, and they're a great way to find these trends. There is much more advanced ways that you can do this. So there's websites like TechCrunch, or you can hire companies that offer innovation scoping services like we do, but to get started to find those initial trends, these are completely free and easy for anyone to access. And finally is tech publications. So there is a huge amount of publications, magazines, online magazines out there that are completely free to access, and will go through all the new technologies that are coming out, give you examples of how they've been used, reviews, insight pieces around what other people are looking at. So I've listed here three of the publications that I tend to look at, because I think they keep on top of what the trends are the best, but there's lots out there, so you can find some that are more suited to you. But Wired magazine is one that most people use as a great reference point for what's going on in the tech industry. Tech Insider, or T3, as you'd expect, they're all available online, they're all available for free. And it's a great starting point to figure out what kind of technologies or digital products you may want to look into or integrate in what you do. And the other benefit to all of these is, if you do develop a digital product, you can put them on these services or submit them to these publications yourself. And they're a great way to find early adopters. So when we talk about early adopters, what we're talking about is people that will take on a product knowing that it is new, knowing that it's probably still in a testing phase, there may be some bugs, and they will accept that, take it on, and essentially provide you feedback and help you develop that product further. But also these people that, by taking it on, by helping you develop it, they become your foundation to push that out to newer consumers. So really getting those first people on board when you are the new products that no one has heard of is quite difficult in a lot of scenarios, where by having this knowledge of saying, okay, but I know a couple of places I can go to right now, submit my product and get people to start signing up and using it, it's a great way to just kickstart that process without having to do it all yourself manually. But obviously, beyond them, there is other ways that you can do, that you can get those early adopters. So you can do things like creating focus groups and pulling together a group of people that fall into a particular criteria, showing them the products, getting them to use it and getting their feedback, or giving them a chance to take it away and use it. What we call an open beta test. So an open beta test is basically where you offer the access to that particular platform or service to anybody that wants to sign up, normally for some benefit, because it is a beta, because it is being tested and it is early stage. So for example, a lot of platforms will say, if you sign up to the beta, it's free. So it's a subscription-based service, for example, but you can sign up for free, but the cost of it is you provide us with feedback. We get to capture your data of how you're using it and use that to better the product, so that when we launch the final version, we know it's good enough for paying customers. Or you may offer particular things where people that took part in the beta may get additional benefits or something when the product launches. A closed beta is when you are giving beta access to a select amount of people. So you are hand-picking people that get to test that product to give feedback. So you may have a client or a couple of clients that you already work with that you may think, okay, if I'm developing a new service, a new product, I might give it to them to use and get their feedback. It may be a particular demographic and you just give it to a few people to test, or something that you put out for people to apply for. This tends to be when people are trying to protect what it is that platform does. So they don't want it to be something that is openly available to all just yet until it's ready to go. So you can put together a closed beta and still get the feedback that you need to make sure your product is good enough. And finally, you can actually sign to agencies and companies that provide beta services. So you can pay a company to run through that platform, find all the pitfalls with it, look at consumer trends, and tell you where you may need to work on that platform to make it more attractive to a consumer. So when you've decided what that product may look like, then we're looking at the development process and how development works. So the first thing to look at is what are the modern trends within development. So the key thing that's really changing the development industry at the moment and really changed how people build and create things, firstly is, I should expect, mobile first development. So most people, like I said earlier, are using mobiles to access data, to access information. And a lot of companies, even when they're looking at business-to-business technologies, are looking at, is there a way that they can make sure that that works on a mobile, on an iPad, on whatever it is? Because for a lot of consumers, that is a deciding factor. Can I access it on the go? Well, if it's a project management tool and it's managing my manufacturing line and telling me how well we're doing, can I see that when I'm out and about in a meeting and I just need to have a quick look at to get a snapshot of the business? The other trend is what we call no-code development. Now, aside from Adenic, I run a marketing agency, so I work with a lot of different developers, and they'll be very unhappy that I'm promoting this because it's one thing that developers hate. But no-code development is the emergence of all these services that allow you to create digital products yourself at a cheaper cost, or sometimes at nil cost, without the need to no-code. So if we look at websites, for example, because this is where we're seeing a huge trend in this no-code development, there is lots of services like Wix, Squarespace, and various others, where without knowing how to code, you can go on there and you can create a basic website for yourself. Now, it is a basic website, but depending on what stage you're at, if you are just looking at a new business model, something you want to test, if you're not in a position where you have the money to go for full development and get all the functionality you want, it is a good place to start. And although, like I said, most developers would hate me for saying it, it's something that you can do to test the water, get a product started, and get the foundations in place. The third trend is cross-platform development. And what I mean by that is it's not just having a platform that works on a product that works on different platforms. People are now looking at the ability to swap platforms while they're using that piece of technology or that digital product. So, for example, if we look at Google Drive, a great example, if I'm working on a document on my laptop and then all of a sudden I need to rush off and get a train to go somewhere for another meeting, then I can take out my iPad, open up that same technology and access whatever I've been working on, continue to work on it. So now more than ever, people are looking at how they can take whatever it is they're doing and use it on any platform, sort of in continuation, so there's no disruption to the workflow. So it's looking at, can that be done in the platform you're developing, in the digital products that you're looking at? And finally, we've already mentioned it, it's tech ecosystem. So can you develop an ecosystem or integrate into one? Because people are much more interested in purchasing something that has the growth potential to become something bigger, to tie in additional services, or something that adds to the additional ecosystem they've already got. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to break down the development process. So this is the bit where, depending on if you're working on it yourself or if you're working with a team, an agency, if you are not used to developing digital products yourself, it's quite easy to get lost in this process, or easy to run into a product without having a process in place. So what we've done is we've just highlighted what a typical development process would look like, how you can run development projects to give them a little bit more focus and to actually give them a clear direction. So the development process is basically just a slightly adapted version of a sprint process that we run sprint processes for various innovation projects, whether they're digital or not. But actually, the sprint process itself started with digital and technology in mind. And the way that this process works is first, it's looking at insight and stimulus. So this is looking at things like the consumer needs that we discussed. It's looking at trends. It's looking at how the industry is working. It's really getting all of that information together and making sure that everyone is on the same page and knows everything that they need to know about what it is you're trying to address, or what information you can use to fuel that fire of the idea. Once we have that insight stimulus in place, we can take all that information and we can move it into ideation. So this is where we would take maybe a trend or a type of innovation, take that consumer need or the pain point we've addressed. So that would be your insight and your stimulus. And we can start looking at what products we can create that may address both of those and create something new. What we tend to say to people is when we're looking at ideation at this point, no idea is a bad idea. So kind of go crazy. Don't worry about, can we do it? Is it possible? Does it work? Just anything that you can think of, any use of technology to address one of those pain points. We normally sort of put up a whiteboard and just have everyone throw Post-its on there, put every idea on. And it's really, this is about opening your mind up and looking at all these options. Then once we've got that, we move to the third stage, which is selection. So selection is basically going through all those ideas and identifying which ones are the ones that are worth taking forward. So you can do this in a couple of different ways. You can put together what we call like a selection matrix, which is looking at the things that matter to you in this product, what it is that you're trying to achieve. So does it help you address new markets? Does it help you address the particular pain point you're looking at? And then also any restrictions. So what is the cost of it? Is it something that we can develop with the technologies and the skills we already have? And basically going through and grading each of those points on maybe yes or no, or low, medium, high, or whatever else, so that at the end of it, you are creating a score for each idea and you lead with the idea that has the highest score. Because in a lot of cases, what we see is the person in the room that essentially has the best job title essentially sort of says, I like that one, and then that's what gets developed. But unfortunately, that's not always the right idea. It's not always the one that's going to have the most value. So we always suggest using a selection matrix, and it removes any influence based on who's in the room. Another way to do it is by giving everyone sticky notes, like we use little circle stickers, giving everyone 5 votes, and then everyone in the room goes and puts a vote on each of the persons that I think is the best idea. So basically the idea at this point is to take all those ideas and just funnel them down to find the ones that are really worth pursuing. Once you have an idea, or maybe 2 or 3 ideas, we go through into wireframing and prototyping. So really this is like a 2-stage process when we talk about development. So the first step would be to work out what is that consumer journey. So what is the user journey when using that product? So this could be as simple as drawing on the board what screens a user would see, drawing out the rough idea of what the app or particular product would be, and what the journey is for the consumer and how they would get to the different bits of information. And then depending on what sort of product it is you're developing and who you want to test this, maybe that's enough. Maybe you're only looking at an internal sign-off to start moving forward with it. So you could just present that and that would be your prototype, because it shows the idea of the concept that you've got and what it may achieve. Or if it's something that you're actually looking at taking into beta, where you're looking at sending it to open beta, closed beta, or putting on one of these websites that I discussed earlier, then it's looking at creating what we call an MVP, a prototype that provides the minimum amount of value that a customer will be interested in. So this would be the starting point of, let's say an app, so to make it easier, starting point of an app with the core functionality, So you can get it out there, you can get people to test it, and you can see what the feedback is. And then once you've ran that test and you've got that feedback, basically you can choose to progress that further and take it out to a live product. Or if you're finding issues, you're finding that there's pain points, things that aren't quite working, you can rework that and you can go back to ideation, or you can maybe go back to selection, or maybe the prototype wasn't right, so you go back to prototype. And sort of start again. So this is, we've drawn it out as a linear process, but actually this is circular. So from any stage within this, so maybe when you're in prototype, you realize as we've put it together, actually this idea just isn't working. So you can loop back to ideation. So it's about being open and going through that loop and working on a product, especially when it's a digital product, to get it right. Because it's very hard if you release a product, it's not good enough, people try it and decide it's not for them. So get them to come back and use it again is very, very difficult. And once you've released that product, one of the key things to remember is that the launch is not the end point of that product. So digital consumers now, they expect more from products than whatever it is that was launched. They want to see growth, they want to see it developed. So what most companies tend to look at doing when they're looking at a digital product is they create a roadmap. So this may be in phases. So maybe this is what our MVP is, this is our core product, but then maybe in the next couple of months we'll add this feature because we think people like it, or we'll look at adding this service to it. It could be something where you look over the 3 to 5 years and say, here's where we are now. In the future, we think this is where I want to be. And you are working on features from day one to get to that point. So it's about showing constant growth in that product. And also by working in this way, by working to a roadmap rather than that is it, that's the end product, you can take on board how users are interacting with the product. You can take on board feedback that you're gaining, and you can use that to adapt and change that product. So finally, what we're going to do is I'm going to go through a framework which basically takes everything what we've discussed and puts it into a format that sort of brings it together, makes it easy to understand. So when we work with clients to develop new products or services, we have a process that we call the EVE methodology, which is actually a much more in-depth process. But today we're just going to go through this top section, which is the roots, core, and outreach, and show you how you can think about your products in this way to make sure you're covering all of these different aspects and develop a successful product. So if you think about whatever it is you're developing as a tree, basically we say the roots are the bit that is below the source. This is kind of like the back end that we spoke about earlier. And this is the systems that make that product work. It could be the infrastructure that goes behind it, any particular functionality or features you may need for that to work. And it's all that kind of stuff that actually provides the roots that makes that product function and makes it do what it needs to do. Core would be the core product itself. So what is it that you're creating? What is it that you're going to offer to your consumers? If you have to do the elevator pitch, what is it? And how do you make sure that that is the right product for your consumers? And then reach is sort of the outreach of that product. So it's about your communication channels, about how you get it out there. How do you get those early adopters? So if we look at roots, as I said, this is really going back to this particular part of the presentation. We're talking about the anatomy of the product. So it's going through how do you store that data, what am I storing, what is the back end, how does it all work? And really what that process that we went through, that development process, the sprint process, you can run a sprint on each one of these areas. So, I mean, you probably start with the core, the initial products first, decide what that is, and then kind of work backwards, look at what do we actually need in place to actually make that work, and then how do we get it out there? How do we get people to see it? So you can run through that sprint process with each of these, considering all the things that we've spoken about here, to make sure that you're not missing any bits and you're developing a very well-rounded product. Core is, as I said, that is the core product. That's the thing you're offering. And this is going back to the slides that we spoke about, where it's the 5 E's, addressing that consumer need, and then taking one of those digital innovations, taking a type of digital innovation. So this is the stimulus and insight area, bit of the presentation I spoke about. And it's really about figuring out what products will have value to a consumer. So you could decide what that is through the sprint process, go back to the slide there, decide what you need in order to make that work. And then finally, it's outreach. So this is how you get it out there. And this is looking at the things that we spoke about. So the different beta boards. If you think that your product is of enough interest, you can send it to publications that may run stories or feature it, or you just review it. You can run focus groups and various beta groups and get that product noticed by people. And like I said, if you take each of those steps, run it through this process. So run it through the ideation, what's the best way of doing it, prototype it, test it. So even with the back end test, if it's the right way, you may have an agency do this for you, test it. And then once you've got all of those together, you have the 3 core elements of a digital product that a consumer should be quite happy to buy into and work with. So just to go through everything we've gone through today. So we've gone through the importance of digital, why it matters to a business, some information about the digital first consumer and the trends that are really leading consumers to think in that way. The anatomy of a digital product, consumer needs, so the 5 E's, the way that you can actually identify what consumer may find interesting in your product. Different types of digital innovation. So these were just sort of top level things, but there's actually, you can actually go further into that if you wanted to. You can actually look at much more trends and scoping out new technologies. How to identify those trends yourself through some of the free tools that we've discussed. How to get early adopters and to get feedback, which is a key thing for any products, any digital product. And then finally, how to take all that and then using a framework, put it in an order that makes sense, and make sure that you've got a very well-rounded product and you're not missing anything that may cause that product to fail within the noisy landscape. So just before we move on, I'm going to pass back to Wayne in a second to go through basically how you can actually get support for some of these things and look at things like funding options. But if anyone's got any questions, if you submit it to the Q&A, it should be just a box in the bottom there. And then between me, Rob and Wayne, we'll try to answer as many questions as we can.
Great, thanks Jamie, really interesting. Dr. Holmes, Jamie says if you've got any questions, just submit them in the box below, and I'm just going to go through some information just about what further support is available via the Humber Growth Hub and the support that you can access, which is completely free of charge. Essentially, the Grow My SME program is set up to help businesses in the area to adopt new digital technology, to find new ways of growth, to succeed. And there's various programs that are in place to do that. One of those is the webinars like the one you've seen this afternoon. And there's a whole range of further webinars coming up which we'll go through, but there's also wider support that's out there that you can look at accessing. Have I got control, Jamie?
Sorry.
There's wider support that you can look at accessing that is available for all businesses. So firstly is the weekly ICT webinars. So the next one to put in your diary, 3rd of August, which is all about driving traffic and around paid advertising. So just going back to Jamie's social media point earlier on, might be something to look at, particularly if you're a direct-to-consumer company. And then further webinars coming up from that 10th of August, using digital technology to make your business stand out from the competition. 14th of August, customer relationship management systems, the importance of an effective CRM. And 17th of August, using podcasts and videos to attract and communicate with customers. Media is a really, really big place for this. So if you can get into the podcasting and blogging and video and YouTube world, this is a really good way to drive attention to your business and show yourself as being a bit of an expert. Jimmy, are you moving stuff around?
Yeah.
So yeah, you can register your business at growmysme.co.uk/inquire now. You can see all the details on the screen there, and once you're registered on there, you'll be able to access all the different ranges of support that's available. Jamie, can you give me control, please?
You've got it.
Thank you, thank you. Right, digital catalyst. So this is the big one to look at: one-to-one support, expert support for your business. And this is set up really to help you adopt digital technology primarily and use this digital technology to help your business to grow. So just a basic overview of how this works is you're essentially assigned a consultant. Adenic are one of the consultants that are on this program, but there's a wide range of consultants from a whole different various backgrounds and industries. And the way it goes is you go through a digital benchmarking process. So this initial assessment just looks at where your business is at the moment, how it's adopting digital technology, what it's currently doing, how open it is to the use of digital technology. And it gives us just a good gauge of where the business is right now and where it's looking moving forward. From the back of that assessment, we then move into a workshop approach where the consultant will work with you and your team on a one-to-one basis to run through a kind of a sprint process like what Jamie was talking about earlier on, so we can identify the opportunities that are available to the business or address any barriers that are preventing it from growing, and then what role digital technology can play in that. And we will work with you to find those solutions and give you the best opportunity for growth. And then this leads on to an action plan where we'll draw out what steps you can physically take to move forward to action the things we've discovered in the workshop. We'll link you to support and guidance and funding, so people that can facilitate those things and also how it can be paid for. And of course, link you to technology providers that can help build, if that's the case, whatever technology it is that we identify that would be beneficial to the business. Just a general overview. I won't read this verbatim, but basically it's one-to-one support. The idea is to help the business grow, develop new products and service, enhance your customer offer, obviously help you to win more work, and as well as attracting staff and retaining staff. And of course, the big one, keeping the business secure, so looking at cyber security, guiding you to grants and funding that's available. And yeah, it says hand-holding, but I mean, it really is that. It's an outside perspective of someone that can come into the business, look at what you're doing and say, look, how can we help you grow this? How can we leverage digital technology, and where can we take you to get to the next step? A few digital projects that might come out of it. These are far from exhaustive, as it says. It could be any number of things, but just to give you an idea, so it might be moving operations to the cloud. It might be looking at tools and applications to increase productivity. Maybe if you're in manufacturing, it might be really good for that. It might be introducing you to e-commerce or selling online. It might be something around cyber security, online accounting, CRM systems, etc. I mean, that's just a little taste, but it could be any number of things from there. Sorry, I keep losing control of this thing. Here we go. And from our side, from the digital capital side, it's really identifying technologies that are out there that you could be taking on, and how these can be integrated with your business, how you can use these moving forward, and manage them to help the business grow. And ultimately, it's about creating impact. We want to increase profits. We want you to grow. We want your business to be more agile, flexible, and resilient. So times like now with the COVID situation, where just about every business in the world has kind of come to a halt, the idea of this is to help you navigate these situations so that you can build an ecosystem around you, an ecosystem of revenue streams and growth. So when one thing isn't working, there's another thing in place there. And of course, again, a big part is, again, looking at staff, cyber security, making sure that you have the best team and you're able to continue to grow. So if you're interested in this program, it's completely free, it's completely funded. It's around about 12 hours of support. You can do this over a couple of days. It really is. I really would employ you to get involved in it. If you're a Humber business and you're an SME, then you're probably qualified. Telephone number on the screen there, or you can, there's the email address there, digitalcapitalist@winningmoves.com. This program is facilitated by a consultancy called Winning Moves, which is by their email there. Or you can go to the Grow My SME website. You see the link at the bottom there, growmysme.co.uk/ICT/digital catalyst. But if you just go to the Grow My SME website, you'll see all the links on there. Sign your business up, and then you'll get access to this support, but also all of the other initiatives that are out there. And as I say, it's completely funded, completely free of charge. It's really, you've got nothing to lose and everything to gain. I'll just put those details up there. Just before we go, it'd be nice if I'm just going to put a poll up if I can access it. Jamie, you might have to pop it up because I can't access it. If you wouldn't mind just taking a couple of seconds just to answer questions on the poll, just to let us know if the webinar was informative. We're basically trying to collect this data so we can understand what type of webinars to show, what type of information you'd like to hear, and what you think would be most relevant to your business. If you can take a couple of minutes just to fill that out, would be much appreciated. And with that, we'll leave these details up on the screen, as I say, just so you can get all of the website links. And of course, if you have any questions with a webinar, or if there's anything that you want more detail on, or you need us to answer specifically for your business, you're also welcome to email across there again at the details and ask those questions, and we'd be happy to answer those afterwards for you. With that, if I can thank Jamie for taking us through the presentation. Thank you, Jamie, and thanks to my colleague Rob. And we look forward to seeing you at the next webinar in the future. Thank you very much for taking part.
Thank you.